Y'all, everyone's been asking me what I run at max level for PvP, so today I thought I would get all my wizards in one video and make a gigantic gear setup video. What you're about to see is, in my opinion, the best gear setup for every school at max level. If y'all want to see this for PvE, let me know in the comments as well and I'll work on that. But in my opinion, the best PvP setup is just one for your school that hits as many stat caps as possible for things like damage, resist, and HP. So today, I'm gonna show y'all the best way to do that on every school, with or without raid gear. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So to start off, I'm on my balance because in my opinion, I think the balance actually has one of the easiest jobs of getting the best stats. So in my opinion, the best hat is the Skyfarer hat. You can open a pack for this. There's also a way to farm this through crafting a gauntlet fight where you can basically fight, I think it's like Malistaire or like the Jade Oni. I don't know, it's like, look it up and you'll find it. But this is farmable. But basically the reason why I like this hat over any other hat is because by giving up a shield pin, you actually gain a power pin. And what's really cool is that you don't really need the resist on those shield pins to actually hit extra resist anymore. So the power pin is really awesome if you need extra accuracy for a low accuracy school like Storm. I like to use Kraken as a way to clear overtimes on me. It's a great way to do damage as well if you run Storm pins like your boy. So this is really nice to have. I highly recommend it. Easily one of the best hats in the game for balance. And then the rest is honestly super simple. The Mire robe with Storm pins seems like the best way to go about, you know, like getting good stats for balance is the Mire robe. And while I am running raid boots, which give me extra sword pins for Storm instead of a shield pin, I would argue you could run anything as long as it has decent resist. So Burrower boots is also really good as long as you can find a way to regain that accuracy that you lose, that 3 accuracy. And for the wand, I'm running Aeon because it's the only wand to my knowledge that gives really good pip conserve, pierce, and damage. I just don't think that exists otherwise. And I'm running the new Athame and the new ring, and if I wanted to, I'd run the new deck. I'm running the one from the raid as well, but you could easily run the Deft Dream Reaver, and it's very similar. The big thing with this setup that I think just makes it better than, you know, most other school setups is that because of the way your accuracy and your pip chance are pretty decent, you actually have an extra triangle socket to work with on your amulet. And because balance is super reliant on pip conserve, and there's no circle jewel giving decks that give pip conserve, I make up for it with the triangle socket here. You end up being at the damage cap and within 1 of the resist cap if you put in a jewel that gives you resist on a pet like this. So I do think the best pet is the Rain Beetle. I do think double resist, mighty, breaker, dealer, and sharp shot, they're all super solid. And I'm running a crystal unicorn to get even more accuracy universally. So I basically very rarely fizzle Krakens and just don't fizzle balance spells in general. I'm rocking a bunch of 170 pins as well, and when you do that, your damage goes up to 160 for Storm and your pierce is 28. So this is a really solid setup. High utility, super easy to use. One of the best setups I have on this account. Now, quite literally everything that I'm doing on my balance, I would argue can also just be done on the death. So there really is, because they have the same accuracy, right? So you have almost the exact same stat burden. The only thing that I've changed with the setup is I'm running the Void hat instead of the Skyfarer hat. You will notice it's still power pin and 2 sword pins, but for some reason the Void hat is just way better for death when it comes to resist. But the Mire robe, still the same. Shabalba boots, still the same. Athame, still the same. And ring is basically still the same. Even the pet is the same. I just like the beetle on the balance, but you need a little bit more damage on the death. So I'm running a Scratchy Frillosaur, and I'm running a mount so that I can get that extra 5 damage. There are some parts of the setup that are a little bit different than the balance that I think make it, you know, a little bit unique, I guess. For one, you just don't get as much pip chance on a death as you do a balance. So instead of running the new ring from Wallaroo, I'm just running the Skyfarer ring, so I get 4 more pip chance than I would otherwise. I do give up 2 damage, which is a little annoying, but you still hit your stat maxes almost entirely, so it doesn't matter. And because I would argue pip conserve isn't as important on a death, I'm choosing to affix accuracy on this just so that I just don't fizzle anything. And I'm running a wand that gives shads instead of pip conserve, which is a trade-off, but I love shads on every school, so I'm just running the raid wand for shads. If you don't have this, I think Aeon wand is absolutely amazing. In fact, the Aeon wand gives you storm damage for death, which I would argue in some ways is even better than the raid wand. You might have noticed by now that this is the second wizard where I'm using this Hun Hao amulet, and that's because this is a best in slot for every school. If you don't have this raid amulet, you could always just run the Wallaroo amulet. The only issue is you end up losing 1 to 2 resist depending on your school. Kind of a crazy change in stats, especially on resist schools, because even with all of these stats, even let's say I were to affix my Brace Jewel, I would still be 1 lower than the stat max of 75 resist. So instead of being 1 below the stat max resist, if I had the Wallaroo amulet, I'd be 3 below, which I would argue is actually, it starts to make a difference at that point. So definitely, if you haven't tried raids, this amulet and the boots that you might see me using on a lot of my wizards, probably some of the best pieces of gear. I guess the wand is also good if you luck out with a good secondary school on it. But I think when they update these to 170, raid gear will be a big part of the level 170 best PvP meta. You could always sub in with other things from the upcoming Nightmare Dungeon, which I assume should be good. If you don't have raid gear, it shouldn't be a big game changer. I would argue the second best setup on this account is probably the life, because I just get this crazy, like, you know, resist damage setup on the life. So the thing that makes healing schools like Life and Storm a little different is, in my opinion, you need 2 shield pins, right? Up to this point, we've been trying to avoid shield pins because resist pins don't really give you as much value. But on a Life and a Storm, shield pins are insane because they give a ton of outgoing. So the 2 pieces of gear that I'm choosing to run shield pins on are Burrower boots, which I think are insanely good. If you don't have these, grab a gold key and farm the boss. It's amazing. And while I do think the Shabalba hat is a really, really good way to get really good offense with the shield pin, the Burrower hat is also extremely good depending on your school. If you don't have the Shabalba hat, what I would do is run the Burrower hat, and in place of the Burrower boots, I would run Meyer boots so that you keep 2 shield pins, but you don't end up losing crazy accuracy by running 2 pieces of Burrower gear. Once again, we're running the Meyer robe, running the Shabalba wand. You're starting to see patterns here at this point, I would assume. And even the amulet and the deck are basically the same across the board. Now, here's where I think it does get a little interesting for healing setups. What I think is really cool about giving up pip chance, which is what the Shabalba hat does for this shield pin hat, is that you actually get the pip chance back when you run the Skyfarer ring. And what's, again, really cool about healing school specifically is the Skyfarer ring is the best ring simply because it gives a lot of pip chance and outgoing. So if you're going to get extra pip chance by running the Skyfarer ring anyways, the logic is you might as well give up pip chance on a piece of gear like this. So I'm running Skyfarer ring. I'm still running a Sharp Shot Mighty Pet. It's literally a carbon copy of the Balance Pet. I just really like this pet. And the one really unique part of the healing setup anyways is that Athames that give outgoing at max level while also keeping a square socket like the Shabalba theme, they give up block. So I don't know if this is worth it. You could always run, I don't know, like the Wallaroo, you know, a theme, and yeah, you won't get 10 outgoing, but you get 100 block. I'm not really sure which one's better. What's really fun is you could actually, you know, get so much health on a life that you could actually affix on Archmastery Jewel, which is what I'm doing because the max HP is 14,893, I want to say, for life. I'm wasting a lot of HP by running a whole tier jewel that gives me HP. So this is one of the few schools where you can run Archmastery and take advantage of your extra HP. I'm running the Rock Mount in order to hit 100% pip chance with this. Again, you're giving up a lot of pip chance with the Shabalba hat. So if you don't have this, you might be able to run a different mount, maybe the Life Culture, and then you could maybe like get more damage than what I have right now. Life seems to get a lot of flexibility. So you have a little bit of extra wiggle room, and I really recommend, you know, using that to make a creative build because you don't get that type of wiggle room on any other school. What I really like about the Skyfarer ring, the Shabalba Athame, and the double mending pins, you end up with 84 outgoing while still being at max pierce, while still being at max res, while still basically hitting max damage and being at max HP. And the specific combination of a Sharp Shot pet and also a jewel to give storm accuracy is that you can end up with 35 storm accuracy, meaning you could use spells like Bury without fizzling while retaining a lot of offense. I like the setup simply because it's super offensive while having a little bit of outgoing, but there are ways to give up damage for more outgoing. So depending on your playstyle, you could give up a little stat here for more healing, maybe less healing for more damage. What kind of made my job kind of easy was that the life setup and the storm setup are super similar simply because you need those shield pins and as much outgoing as possible to be competitive. What is very different about Storm though is the max damage you can get is 202, which is insanely hard to reach. Your max resist cap is at 55 and your max pierce is at 57. So as you can see, the setup comes really, really close to hitting that. I'm even within 100 HP of the max HP with my Storm. So the setup is super similar. I'm running myth damage because I don't know, I think it's fun, but you don't have to. But it's still the Shabalba hat. If you have the Burrower hat, run that instead. The shield pin is the important part. And I'm running Meyer robe and Burrower boots on this guy as well with the Shabalba staff. the Shibalba theme, and the Skyfarer ring. Even the amulet and the deck are the exact same as what I said on the life, simply because you're just trying to get a lot of offense, a lot of outgoing. You're trying to use the fact that you're getting extra pip chance on your ring by giving up pip chance on another piece of gear. However, unlike a life, I don't think you can afford to run a rock mount because you don't hit your other stat caps so easily on a storm. So the pet is the only thing that's different. Instead of a mighty sharp shot pet, I decided to throw in pip chance. Now this pet looks a little janky because it got Defy instead of proof of that to a fixed proof, and it was kind of annoying, but this pet's ridiculously good, right? I mean, you're getting the 3 storm elves. Highly recommend this pet, and because you can run, you know, any pet you want with this, with, you know, you're not trying to get a gear set, I'm just running the Clockwork Courser to get the extra Pierce that I'm missing out on. I have yet to PvP with the setup, but I do think 64 outgoing, max damage and Pierce almost, max res with 3-piece shads should be pretty decent. I don't know if Storm's even a good school, but I would argue this is one of the best stat profiles you could get, so I would try to get this if you want. If you don't have raid gear, it's not really that serious. Let's say that you don't have this, just run the Burrower hat and replace the Burrower boots with, you know, the Meyer boots, and you'll lose a piece of shads, and that's about it. Now, I'm still figuring out PvP on the fire, but this is a setup that I'm running at the moment. Not really sure if it's good, but I'm actively choosing to give up resist. This is the one school that I've done this on so far. The max resist on a fire is 60. I'm running 57. Pretty low compared to the other schools you might have noticed. I'm always like 1 within the resist cap, but I think fire stats are kind of ass otherwise, so that's why you'll notice I'm running a hat that doesn't give that much resist, but I'm getting an extra power pin, lots of damage and Pierce and accuracy for it. And I'm also running Burrower robe because I have a hat that gives me so much accuracy, and I'm also running Shibalba boots, Shibalba wand, the same thing that you've seen, Skyfarer ring, you know, like you've seen all of this already. The big difference is, just like the death, I'm running a sharp shot pet with mighty so that I could run a Frillasaur basically, and that just gives you a ton of damage on a fire. And what's really cool about this setup specifically is it is a 4-piece shad setup. I don't think you can do this so easily on any other school. Every other school either like doesn't have enough, like, you know, shield pins to, like, you know, use a setup like this, or you're giving up crazy resist. That's basically why I think fire uniquely can hit 4-piece shads, which is one big advantage to have. Pretty standard setup, but you get within 100 HP of the max HP. I'm actually affixing Arch Mastery just like I did on the life because you end up with a little bit of extra HP. And you end up within 1 of the Pierce limit and 1 of the damage limit by giving up a little bit of resist. I would argue that you're better off on a fire getting really close to your max offense while giving up a little bit of defense, especially with 4-piece shads. Not sure if this is the best setup. It just seems to be something that uniquely you could do on, you know, a fire, so I've chosen to do it. The ice is such a sad state of affairs, y'all, but this is my gear setup on the ice. I think it's a little bit ass. I think by now, you know, some things are pretty standard. Meyer robe on a defensive school, very standard. I'm running a square socketed theme to hit a lot of HP. I don't really need pip chance on the ice that much. That's not really what I struggle with, so no Skyfarer ring on this guy. And as usual, the Hun Hao amulet, the Hun Hao deck. Now here's where things get a little weird. I'm running a very, very different shadow pip giving wand. Instead of going for the Shibalba wand, which doesn't give pip conserve, I'm choosing to run the Hun Hao Comet Sword. Now this gives shads, pierce, damage, block, and pip conserve. Really, really good stats, but you end up giving up same school wand hits. Now the only other school that I think pip conserve is this important on is a balance, but I did not want to give up my balance wand hits on a balance. I think they're actually very useful, but because Frostbite is a super easy way to break set shields, I decided I would be willing to do it on an ice. That's the one small change. You end up with 3-piece shads like all these other setups, and you also gain pip conserve by doing this. You still don't have a deck that gives pip conserve, and you don't have enough stats to affix a jewel that gives pip conserve, so you still have pretty low pip conserve compared to every other, you know, like high pip conserve setup you might have seen. The other things that I don't love about the setup is, again, instead of the Skyfarer hat, the Void hat is better, so I'm running this just like the Death. This is like the best hat that gives a power pin. But I found that in order to get really good pip chance and accuracy, the only way to really make it work with a pet like this, right, because you need so much more damage on an ice, is to run the Void. So I'm running 2 different pieces of Void gear, and these give up, you know, crit, which I don't really love. Now, fun fact, the upcoming Nightmare Dungeon gear is also going to give up crit for every other stat, so this is going to be very similar to what I end up running anyways. But you end up with a lot of damage. You can't run a Sharp Shot pet because you need the extra Pain Giver to run anywhere close to max damage, which is 175. But if you affix a, you know, the Undauntable Jewel, Defy, whatever, you hit 79 res, which is within 1 of the max res, and you also really do keep a lot of your storm accuracy, so you can do things like Kraken, which you need to do on a defensive school when someone's going crazy on the overtime. Whether I'm running a lot of storm accuracy or not simply depends on whether I can play offensively enough to need Kraken or not. I don't think an Ice can, which is why this setup kind of requires a lot of storm accuracy. But yeah, I think the real differentiation between Ice and the other schools is it's really hard to get good damage with good pip chance and accuracy, so you need a pet that gives you Pain Giver, and by needing to have an extra slot for damage instead of accuracy or pip chance, you end up giving up crit in places where you wear the hat and the boot. Now, my Myth is one of my favorite setups because I actually think Myth has some really, really cool options. Right now, I'm running a Myth Fire setup. You could easily do this with Storm as well if you want to use Storm utilities. I think that's really cool. But just like every other setup you've seen, I'm running Mire Robe, I'm running the Shabalba boots, I'm running the Shabalba wand and actually using the fire damage from it, which I think is cool. And I'm still running the same set of, you know, ring, you know, amulet and deck. Like, you've seen all of this. Like, I feel like this is a pretty standard thing across the board. The pet is where I think it gets kind of interesting. Instead of accuracy on my pet, I've chosen to go with Dragonlance. And the reason is because on this wizard, I would argue, giving up a square socket on an Athame is way worth. And by giving up a square socket, I earn a triangle socket, so I don't need accuracy on a pet, and I've given myself fire accuracy, so I can basically use both myth and fire spells. If you were to replace this fire accuracy with storm accuracy and replace your, you know, power pins that give fire accuracy with storm, then you would also be able to hit max accuracy for Storm, which is really, really cool. You can basically choose whether you want to go with, you know, Krakens and that type of stuff, or you could go, in my opinion, what's really cool is like a Glimpse Immolate route. These spells are really fun to use on a Myth, so I don't know. I've been really enjoying it quite a bit. Though the one thing that's a little different, I think because you just need a lot of resist, I chose to go with Burrower hat. Neither the Skyfarer hat or the Void hat give you as good stats as a Burrower hat if you want defense, so that seems to be a good reason to keep a shield pin, which doesn't really seem to exist on that many other schools when they're not healing. But by running that Dragonlance and the extra pip chance that you do get on this specific triangle socket giving a theme, you basically just run a lot of pip chance, right? You still keep a lot of shads, which is really, really cool. And your pierce is within 1 of the cap, your damage is within 2 of the cap, and your resist is within 1 of the cap, while your HP is a little bit away, but your utility is through the roof. I think if you really wanted to run like max HP, this is a one setup again where max HP isn't my priority, it's the utility of the damage output. If you were to run it, you would just have to find a way to make up that accuracy. Maybe a Sharp Shot pet, maybe instead of a Clockwork Courser like I'm running a Crystal Unicorn. I'm sure there are ways. Maybe give up a shield pin here for a power pin. There's ways to do it. I just think it's not worth compared to, like, you know, what you could do right now on a Myth. Y'all, those are all of my gear setups. Hopefully I did a good job explaining my thought process, but really what I hope this does is it lets you make your own setup. I feel like these are all just based on my playstyle, which is why there's some similarities across the board, but depending on how you play, you could go crazy defense, crazy offense. And again, if you feel intimidated by all the gear, I would wait until the Nightmare Dungeon. It should be dropping in a few weeks, and everyone should be on a very, very even playing field, whether they do raids, whether they have pack gear, any of that. And in the meantime, while you wait, you can get all your Wallaroo gear, which is already some of the best gear in the game. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.